Hey out there, weirdos. Jesse here. I just wanted to break in front and let you know that there was a significant delay between recording and posting this episode. I had some hardware issues, which thankfully at this point have been resolved, but there were also some pretty significant changes to routine. My daughter actually started middle school, and since she started middle school, we've had to really adjust things in the mornings, which is usually when I would post and edit podcast episodes. We should have some more content released more routinely moving forward, and you're certainly going to be hearing a lot about Captain Con and the MCCI in the coming weeks. We've already got a bunch of content creators signed on, and the hype train is leaving the station. And now, without further ado, enjoy this episode of Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
And welcome back to Boring Conversation, everybody. We have a kind of a cool episode. It's one that we threw together sort of kind of at the last minute. We really didn't even start talking about this until last week, but I brought Doug and Brandon on from the Danger Planet channel. We wanted to talk a little bit about our experiences throughout tabletop gaming with kind of a focus on Malifaux itself, and not necessarily just a history, but really how we identified our strengths and weaknesses as players, and what sort of process we go through to improve our play. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of the episode, of course, we need to do some intros. So I, am Jesse, joined by
I'm Doug.
And
I'm Brandon.
Cool. So both Doug and Brandon are, of course, from the Danger Planet. I've made a couple of guest appearances on there myself, and I'm really, really happy to have them back on the podcast. Before we get into what we're drinking, I just wanted to see if you guys had any plugs. I'll go ahead and go first. So, obviously, I've been kind of talking here and there about ArmorCon, which is coming up in just about a month from the date of recording. We're looking at the weekend of October 14th through the 16th. That's going to be in Marlborough, Massachusetts. We're going to be doing a Henchman Hardcore and an All-Out Brawl on Friday night. We're going to be doing a 5-round, 2-day Gaining Grounds 3 tournament using the singles format and no bans or any other adjusted formats. Really looking forward to it. It's kind of the first con of the New England season. And I know, just as a quick plug to some other guys out there, I know that that's actually the weekend after the upcoming, I believe it's the Houston, Texas GT. So if you can't make it out to the beautiful Northeast in one of the best times of year to be here, I suppose you could go down to Texas the weekend before and, play in the sand. I don't know. I don't even know what they have down there. Coming up very, very soon, after the turn of the year, we actually have Captain Con once again. It'll be my second year TOing there. The 2023 site and event schedule just went live, and I am planning on running the Malifaux Content Creators Invitational and the Booty and Plunder, the 2-day 5-round tournament there as well. So look for more details coming up on that very soon. But Doug, why don't you tell us a little more about what the Danger Planet has going on?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for inviting us back on. I think I'd done a tournament report with you guys, so this will be my second time on it. We just wrapped up our 8th faction focus video as well as our 8th tier list video. And so now we're going to be moving on to keyword breakdowns. And basically what we're going to be doing is every 2 weeks putting a poll up on our community tab on our YouTube channel. And it'll be 5 options. They'll each be a keyword and a master. And basically whoever wins that poll, we're going to make a keyword tier list video breakdown on, where we talk about all the different unit selections and how they piece into constructing teams specifically within a Graining Grounds 3 environment. And we're going to be doing that series with Pope Darpa and Bad Fuhaku. And then we have a series coming up with you where we're going to be doing with Boring Conversation. So I guess you/Boring Conversation, where we're going to be doing a breakdown of every new keyword in the new Malifaux expansion book. So those are the two major ongoing Malifaux focused kind of analysis like series that we've got. We also have Malifaux Masterclass, which is a tactics series where once a month we release kind of like a tactics video using Vassal.
Fantastic. And Brandon, what do you have going on?
Well, I mean, obviously, from the Danger Planet, I have a lot of the same stuff Doug has going on. But it sounds like right after PAX Unplugged, the week after PAX Unplugged, which I believe at this point is December, I want to say 10th, something like that. We have an event happening in Boston. It's the Everwinter GT, where we had a 3-round Malifaux event last year, and we're still trying to figure out what it's going to be. But there's definitely going to be a Malifaux event. I believe it's. I think it's I believe it might be the 10th and 11th of December, and it's gonna be wild. So keep an eye to the ground, an ear to the ground for that.
An eye to the ground.
Keep an eye to the ground for that, and we'll have more details that you can hear or see later on.
Cool. And I know before we started recording, you said you had some Call of Cthulhu, and it probably wasn't appropriate for the podcast, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah, so at the Danger Planet, we're we do a lot of things, right? We play Malifaux a lot, and that's like probably everyone, I think, on the channel's sort of main game / favorite game. But we do a lot of other miniature stuff, and we do a lot of other board games and card games and role-playing games. So one of the things that we're going to start moving into soon is our Call of Cthulhu coverage. Fresh off of literally at my game store that I work at right now, just having finished a Call of Cthulhu session. I'm extra enthused for it, but it's going to be a good time. We're going to do some Call of Cthulhu stuff, which has been a game that I've been playing for like 20 years, and I just can't get enough of it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about some of that, and then we'll see where we go with it.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to hearing that. I actually just, for the first time in years, started in a live play role-playing session. Haven't done any role-playing at all, and it's not quite Cthulhu. Delta Green, so not a good one.
Jesse,
so not quite Call of Cthulhu, but real
can
close.
I recruit you for my Malifaux podcast / Cthulhu campaign all-stars game that is theoretically happening at some point soon?
Yes, definitely. After the recording, make sure you remind me to send you the character backstory that I put together for
I want to read
character.
It right now. I will await with I will ooze with anticipation while I'm waiting.
I've just started saying I await with pleasing expectation.
Don't say that while Brandon's drinking something. He would shoot it straight out of his nose.
He does love that sentence and that musical.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I literally have never heard that before.
Okay, fair enough.
This isn't a Brandon bit either. I really I don't know what that's from. Can you tell me? I'm going to Google it if you don't.
It's from Hamilton, the musical.
Oh, I've never seen Hamilton.
Wait, what?
Sorry. What?
I haven't.
Dude, that's not cool.
Okay.
That's not cool.
So anyway, I said I was going to cut all that, but I'm probably not going to cut all that. At any rate, because I'm a hack, basically. Before we get into the what are we drinking segment, I had such a wild day today that I feel like I need to share it with you guys because you're my friends and I love you to death. So
yeah, sure.
I said I was going to make the call sheet for this episode at 9:00 this morning, but then I had decided I had some friends coming over tonight, so I was going to make pork belly burnt ends, like in the smoker.
Ooh.
Do it all day.
Ooh.
So I did that. And then partway through doing that, I was like, hey, I should probably make tacos out of these. And then I was like, hey, I should probably just make tortillas because, why not make tortillas? And I should probably make my own barbecue sauce too because, why not do that? And then one thing led to another. I ended up being in the kitchen literally all day. So that was fun. And then my friends got here and we decided that myself and one of them were going to do one of those Pocky one-chip challenges, which you may or may not have seen.
Oh, I've seen
on
those.
The internet.
Yeah.
Don't do that. It was horrible. I really, really like spicy food. And
did the ghost pepper do you in?
Dude, it was brutal. It was brutal.
Did you eat the ghost pepper one?
Yes.
What did it make you cry?
No, but I had to go walk it off, and my friend drank like 3 glasses of milk, and then graduated to a glass of half and half to try and put it all away.
Oh, gosh.
And if you can imagine what drinking a mason jar full of half and half is like,
No,
well,
I can't. I don't think I would. I think I'd rather
yeah,
just puke fiery nonsense than do that. Oh,
yeah. So, needless to say, didn't have quite as much prep time for this one today as I thought I would. But I get a good feeling about it. I think it's going to be good.
I feel
Yeah,
like we'll get through this together as a
We will.
unit.
yeah.
We
I think
will.
we'll all
Don't
be stronger for it at the end.
don't feel bad, Jesse. Around the time that you planned on starting the call sheet, I got to my game store. Actually, I think I got here at about 8, and then um, throughout the day, just had realization after realization that I booked so many things today. I ended up at one point today. I was simultaneously running a Star Wars tournament, a Star Wars Legion tournament, a Digimon tournament, and also DMing a game of Call of Cthulhu, whilst maintaining like register stuff and answering questions. And then there was like also like a Pokemon event happening in the background, and like another D&D game and a Magic thing. It was wild. It was a wild Sunday. I don't even know where I am right now.
You're in the back of a game store upside down in a nest of spider eggs.
Okay, look, you're not supposed to talk about the upside down part
Oh,
or the
sorry.
nest.
Okay. So
All right.
let's just, before we get into the meat of the episode, let's talk about what we're drinking. So I have an Elysian Brewing Company Space Dust IPA, which is a beer that I didn't actually discover until fairly recently. It's delicious though. It's like a straight up like high ABV West Coast IPA with Chinook, Citra, and Amarillo, which are like probably my 3 of my favorite hops. And it's already halfway gone, so there's a good chance I'm going to be getting another beer before the end of this episode.
You'll likely need it being on an episode with Brandon and myself, to be honest, if we're being honest with one another, right?
I'm really looking forward to the outtakes. It's going to be
Yeah.
great.
They'll be plentiful for sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
What about you, Doug? What you got?
I have a limited vintage. It's a 2022 Mountain Dew Spark. Now, the twist on this one is that it's not just your everyday Mountain Dew. In fact, it is Mountain Dew with a blast of both raspberry and lemonade flavored with other natural flavors as well.
That sounds delightful and exactly not the thing I personally would be drinking at 9 o'clock
It's
at night.
it's like the only drink I have left in my house, and it's a little too sugary, and I'm too lazy to get up and make myself a glass of Earl Grey tea with a ton of honey. That's like what I really want, but I'm just too lazy.
How about you, Brandon? What do you got?
Well, I'm drinking a Lingonberry flavored G Fuel right now, which I believe is caffeine milligram 1280 through 1580 for the day, which I think puts me somewhere between unconscious and acute liver failure. But, you know, it's about the friends we made along the way, not about the liver function and capacity after
Yeah.
said shifts.
Livers, we don't need livers where we're going.
Actually, I'm not sure if caffeine impedes your liver or your kidneys, but I can get an answer. One moment.
Yeah.
Someone call the producer. They'll
Yeah,
check
quick,
for us.
someone call
'cause
the
we have one of
producer.
those. So what are we talking about today? So we already talked a little bit in the intro, but we really kind of wanted to have kind of like a roundtable discussion about our experience in games, going back, to the very beginning of our gaming experience. And then talking a little bit about when we decided to get competitive, or not even really competitive, but make a concerted effort to improve our play at a particular game rather than just grabbing our models, grabbing our cards, rolling up to the table and seeing what happens. So I really wanted to have a nice discussion about like identifying weaknesses in play, the sort of process that we each go through to identify and address those weaknesses, and how we go about improving our play and avoiding common pitfalls in doing so, such as not blaming it on the dice, not blaming it on the cards, not blaming it on this, that, or the other. That said, I think that a good way to start is just to recap a little bit about our gaming histories. So without going into exhaustive detail, I thought maybe we could share kind of what our first games and experiences were leading up through today. So for myself, my first real like game store type game, like miniatures game, card game, whatever, was BattleTech. Oddly enough, playing with little cardboard standees in like 6th grade. over at my friend's house, and knowing from like that very first game that like dice and little stand-up miniatures and maps and tactics, as much as my sixth grade brain could comprehend, were definitely for me. I started playing a little bit of that. I also had a friend group that started to get together and play the original Hero Quest. Had a fucking ball with that. And yes, I did buy the Kickstarter. And yes, I did buy all the stretch goals because thank you very much.
Nice.
Yes. Have I played it yet? No, they're still all in the box they were shipped in. But I did open them all and look at them. So we'll get there, one thing at a time. I moved on to a little bit of Magic the Gathering in junior high as well, and then I picked up my first major minis game with 40K second edition in high school with Tyranids. Moved in, played that kind of off and on, and then when I got into college, I started working at a gaming store. And then that's when I kind of really started spreading my wings, got into fantasy, fantasy was probably the first game that I started getting like actually competitive and trying to improve my play with. I got pretty serious about it, but I mean, serious to the degree that you could before the internet really kind of existed on the large scale. Like, you just didn't really have the resources that a lot of people do these days to get, headlong into games and net list and discuss tactics and go on, Reddit and what have you, for all hours of the day. We had some forums, we had some message boards, but I mean, it just there wasn't a wide enough audience to really dive in the way that we can now. Most of the time, I just kind of scavened it up and shot people and rolled lots of dice and lost my own dudes. It was great.
Dude, Rattling guns in like 5th and 6th ed fantasy were the shit.
Oh yeah.
Dude.
Bro.
I think probably so. Kind of getting heavily into fantasy led into really loving Mordheim. Mordheim's not really a game that you can get like super competitive with just because it's very swingy. But it's probably the one that I started like really truly falling in love with. Around that time, I started kind of falling out of minis games though, and I started getting really heavily into CCGs. I ended up getting real heavy into Magic 1.5, which is like an old format where you could use some old, like Alpha, Beta, Dark, like really, really old cards.
And
but
you
it had
still have those cards, and you're sipping them to your friend Doug Brecker because you want him to have them?
No, I sold a bunch of cards, like my Underground Seas, and sets of other limited cards. Just before the market really exploded with Magic, so go
Did
me.
you have black border or white border Undergrounds?
A mix of both black and white border Underground Seas.
Oh, you had like real legit Undergrounds.
Oh yeah, I had real legit ones. Unfortunately, they were only going for about $120 a piece when I sold them. So yeah, go
Rip
me.
Jesse's value exit.
Yeah, that wasn't so good. But anyway, got pretty heavily into Magic 1.5 as well as some other kind of dead CCGs at this time. Shadow Fist, Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, Warlord. I got really deep into Warlord. Oh boy.
The 40K card game?
No,
Warlord?
Warlord was a weird like synthesis of D&D in a card game.
It had,
you set your dudes up in a formation and you rolled a d20 and added attack values.
I played
against
that as well.
ACs.
And they had the big blood drop that had the life. The life. There was the blood drop, and then I played that as well. It was fun.
Yeah, so I got pretty heavily into that, and that's actually the first game that I ever went to a convention to play. It wasn't a phenomenal game. It still has a decent play base, even though it's dead. But yeah, that was the first time that I actually went out of my bubble of my store to play a game. Did that quite a bit for Warlord before the game kind of died, and I went and moved out of state. When I moved out of state, I stopped wargaming entirely for a couple of years. So shortly after I moved back, one of my friends said, "Hey, you really liked Mordheim. You might like this game, Malifaux." So I got a demo, and at that point, I was hooked hard. And I have never fallen for a game in the way that I have Malifaux, which kind of leads us to today. So, Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about your gaming history?
Yeah, sure. So I really started in middle school. I started playing around 3rd ed Warhammer 40K. and I remember it was me and like 3 of the kids at my lunch table. I played Iron Warriors, my buddy played Corn Demons, and my other buddy played Necrons. And the same group of us kind of played from middle school through the end of high school. And that carried me, I think, like through 6th or 7th edition ish. And then when I went to college, I didn't really do a lot of tabletop gaming or card games. I was a track guy and a cross country guy, and I ended up just always being in season because I would go cross country into indoor into outdoor, and I was a distance runner. So basically, my seasons would always fully overlap with each other, and I literally never had free weekends, so I couldn't go to card stores anymore, which meant I couldn't play Warhammer anymore. Um, then when I graduated and kind of towards the end of college, I started picking up competitive Magic the Gathering because I picked up a couple of decks, or like rather one deck from a friend, and won a couple events and started adding cards to it. And then I kept going to the events because I would do well at them and cash out. And I played kind of through the end of college up until Throne of Eldraine, which was maybe a year and a half ish ago. Pretty competitively. Like at the very end of it, I was a Pro Tour grinder, like a very low level Pro Tour grinder, basically. And then I just didn't have time with work. Basically, I couldn't keep it up. And then when I was looking back into picking stuff up, it was during the pandemic, and I actually picked up Warhammer again right at the very end of 8th edition, going into 9th edition, and I really didn't enjoy the game system really all that much
Hmm.
anymore. And so I was looking around for alternatives, and one of my really good friends, Sam Barrows, Mr. Barrows, actually introduced me to Malifaux as an alternative. And when I played it and I saw the system, it was just so much better. Line of sight mechanics were better. The variance from going from a 1 to 6 dice roll system to a 1 to 13 card deck, just so much better. I thought the rule set was tighter. I thought it was more competitively maintained as a product in a package. And I have just gone super in since that point. And it's basically the game that I've hyper focused on for. I mean, you've pretty much known me, Jesse, my entire Malifaux career because
Hmm.
the first ever tournament I went to, I played you in it, actually.
Yeah,
You
true story.
crongled me. Like,
Well,
absolutely crongled me. Yeah, it was
you
Mizaki
did
one versus
literally just
Maltucket
say that
one.
it was like your first tournament ever. So
Yeah, yeah, it was
I
fun.
think
I
we
learned a
can.
lot that game.
Yeah.
I learned how the Bayou drummer works that game very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But yeah, that's basically my background. So I started out in 40K in middle school. I've always been a nerd. I played tabletop with my buddies basically until high school. Dropped it until the end of college. Picked back up Magic, and then Magic turned into ninth, and then I got my hands on Malifaux and basically have just been focusing on that since then, since the very beginning of GG2, basically.
Nice. And
Yeah.
Brandon, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I sort of started playing like card games. I think I was like 9, maybe, and I would ride my bike like 45 minutes to the local mall to go do this, which I'm sure was totally a thing that I should have been doing. But I started playing card games. Mostly, I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh for like a couple weeks, and then got really into Magic around like Apocalypse, I think, is when I started. And then from Magic, I sort of was playing card games every week, and I started doing the run tournaments thing even as a kid because they needed somebody to do it. And I've just always been very um, logistically oriented, I guess. That was sort of my first experience with arbitration and running tournaments and events and stuff. And then shortly thereafter, a Games Workshop opened up the hallway from the card store, and I walked in, got an intro game, and was immediately hooked on miniatures and started playing Warhammer Fantasy. I've never really liked sci-fi stuff, so like 40K was always something I sort of skirted around for a long time. But I started playing Warhammer Fantasy, and then eventually, maybe about a year or two after I started working there, and then if you worked for Games Workshop at the time, you had to play both games. It was required. So and then I got into Dark Eldar. So I played Dark Elves and Dark Eldar, and I played Dark Elves pretty much in every tournament I could get to. Really, I started doing the grindy stuff, and then I started running tournaments for Games Workshop, and I like worked at Games Day and stuff. And then I sort of quit the gaming when the Games Workshop big implosion happened. So I stopped playing card games and war games and stuff, and that did the military thing for a little while. When I came back, I immediately started hanging out at card stores again, started playing Magic again, got really into like the sort of competitive side of Magic. I started playing War Machine and Hordes, which was my first foray back into miniatures gaming post Games Workshop, where I learned for the first time that there were other war games that were good. And I guess I stopped drinking the GW Kool-Aid at that point. So and then I became a Magic judge and started running Magic tournaments, and then I did that for forever and ever. I did that until 2017, I think. So like 6 years, I think, all in all. So I was an L2. I did a bunch of Grand Prix. I did like 40 Grand Prix one year, which is like multiple 1,000+ player Magic events. So I sort of got through the competitive side of Magic by really, really aggressively studying the rules. And the Magic comp rules are no joke. They're like there's a lot of arcane and shenanigan-y bullshit there. And then eventually, the pandemic hit, and a couple of friends were bugging me. War Machine sort of faded when 3rd edition came out, and when the pandemic hit, a bunch of friends were sort of bugging me and were like, well, let's get some models. And I wanted to support Battleground, the store that I work at now. And so we picked up Warhammer again, because I was like, all right, well, I guess we can do Games Workshop. It's fine. Because War Machine wasn't an option, and I didn't know anything else was out there, really. So we started playing that, and then it was at the same time, a little bit after Sam and Doug, because I met Sam a million years ago at Games Workshop, and I met Doug at this game store, Battleground. They started playing Malifaux, and I was like, whatever, man. It's a small scale skirmish game. How good it could be? I guess I'm back into 40K now. And I played like one game of Malifaux, and I immediately quit 40K and Sigmar. And I have never looked back. I literally, so I think I had already agreed to be a third in a triples tournament at that time, when I played my first game of Malifaux. So I didn't have any choice. I had to honor the commitment. But I played that tournament, and I've never played another game of Age of Sigmar, and I do my best to not have to play 40K ever, because good Lord, Malifaux. So I try. I mean, I played the game a couple times after that to really, really confirm that was sort of it, because I wasn't actually even planning to do it. There were a bunch of motives behind me playing Malifaux. Which that'll be its own episode at some point. We'll have to talk about. I have some tales from the game store about that one, but yeah. So I got into Malifaux, and then.
But just as a high level overview, it was a healthy mixture of curiosity, spite, fear. I don't know, curiosity, spite, and general intrigue.
Yeah, mostly the spite, but yeah, definitely the other two. I was like immediately hooked. It's such a tight rule set. It had so much going on. And then it was like maybe, around that time, I started working at the game store, and then we started getting it happening at the game store. And then it was like sometime between my first game and like 2 or 3 months later, the store full stocked Malifaux, and I owned all of Neverborn. And I've never looked back.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, it was a time. Man. Yeah, I only do things at breakneck speed. That's where we're at.
That seems very on brand for you. Yeah, there you go.
On brand. We did it.
Yeah, indeed.
Was that intentional wordplay, or does it just happen because you're so poetic, Jesse?
No, that just happened. There was no intention behind that. So. That said, now that we kind of have a sense of where each other's competitive gaming experience came from, let's talk a little bit about like when you've identified you've had gaps in gaming in the past, and like what you've done to move past them. So, let's just kind of open it up. I mean, who wants to speak up first? What were kind of your first struggles that you identified, and how'd you get past?
Brandon, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the very first time that I ever was like, man, I want to get better at this game was really Warhammer Fantasy, right? So for Warhammer Fantasy, my remedy, I was losing a lot of games, and I was playing Dark Elves, which weren't a terribly, in 6th edition, they weren't a super super top of the line like high end competitive army. They do. Oh man, did they change that at some points, in the fantasy trajectory? But
Well, that's
um,
that's the nature of GW is
yeah.
the
Oh,
yeah, oh boy.
Oh, it is. Oh, it is. And so like my sort of remedy for that was like I just started grinding tournaments. I started talking to people, and more than anything else, I started reading like army tactics, like rank and file army tactics articles that were meant for like I think mostly historical miniatures gaming. But this was like the early days of the internet. We're talking like 2004 or so. Like the people had internet, but I think I had just gotten my first like dial-up connection and laptop at the time, and there just weren't people doing this sort of shit, that it just didn't exist. And so it was a lot of that. And then like jumping into my Magic career, I've sort of always been really, really arbitrationally oriented, I guess. And so I was start coming back into Magic when I got back into gaming after the military, and I really was looking into getting better. And then I was like, oh, there's this judge program. I've always, the rules are really complex. Maybe by understanding and mastering the application of the rules, I can get better at tournament play. And that's really like becoming a Magic judge was probably the most impactful decision I've ever made in terms of stepping up my gaming ability. That and the what do you call it there? That book. Pat Chapin wrote a book called Next Level Magic, was a really good read. Granted, I think he's a murderer, so I think maybe don't buy it.
Is he actually?
Yeah, I think he murdered a guy.
Oh, great.
Yeah, there was a whole big thing about it. It was sort of insane, but good strategy. Just don't give him money. Next Level Magic is really good, and there's a bunch of books like that now. So I'm not necessarily plugging that one, but reading that and getting to the Magic rules. That was sort of it, because that gave me sort of a competitive edge. Because if you understand the depths of a system compared to someone who doesn't, you have access to more information and can make more informed decisions. And so since that point, I think actually in my my history bit, I forgot to mention that I played L5R, and I think I was like the 8th best Scorpion player in the world for a while. Because I did the L5R thing and then started doing the L5R judge program, and I went to L5R Worlds every year. Sorry, that's a weird chapter of my life that was recent and then abruptly ended in COVID when they canceled the game, and I was really upset about it. But so with L5R, the big thing that I did was sort of what I'm doing now with Malifaux, right? I in addition to trying to run tournaments and arbitrate events, I sort of got into this position where I started a podcast. Me and the buds, we were playing and grinding at all the local tournaments, and then we got together one day and we're like, let's fucking, let's do something. So we started talking about and reviewing cards, and through sort of the discussion and mingling of, is this good? What applications is this good in? What are your thoughts on this? It was sort of the thing that I think people do when they're talking about things with their friends. But that's not a conversation that I've ever been like. I sort of feel comfortable with it if I want to, but I've never been a person who tries to like have that conversation outside of an official venue, And so like just being involved in like a podcast or a YouTube channel is really how I develop all of those conversations, right? And so my biggest advice, if you want to get better at games, is do a channel about it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of weird advice, I think, but yeah. So and then Malifaux started, right? So my Malifaux weaknesses first. Obviously, I think we talk about this a lot. Doug and Sam and I, like our the breakdown, at least how I envision learning Malifaux, is the very first thing that you need to do is pick a crew and learn that crew. Once you know that crew, the next stage is, maybe you want to learn your faction, but it's mostly like learning. Or learning the rules is at really stage one. Once you sort of have a basic understanding of the rules, you learn your crew. Once you understand your crew, the stage of learning this game that is the massive challenge is learning the other 55, soon to be 129 million crews. And that part, there's nothing better than just consuming content, or I guess making content online. Talking with people. Like every time I play a game of Malifaux, I play against a crew I've never played against, right? And I learn a little bit more.
Yeah,
So I
it's
get
kind of interesting when you say like every time that you play against a different crew. And I mean, to a certain degree that's true because I mean, it's kind of a corny way to say it, but like, the same crew piloted by two people is really going to play very differently. But I mean, even just on a
Mhm.
very granular level, I mean, I've been playing Malifaux for, like I said, since like early second edition. Um, in third edition, there are, in all the games that I've played, there are literally masters still that I have never played against.
Yeah.
Like a good number of them. Um, Never
which is
mind now that
crazy
titles
to
have
think
come out.
about.
I mean, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, so like when we played each other the last time, which was I think at the event in Off the Wall, not the most recent one, the one before
Yep.
that, I had never played against Mei Feng before. Like that was my very first game ever. I've seen some Mei Feng games, and I've been near them and sort of answered them, but I can't it's theoretical application of what crews do and what things they have is one thing, but learning that on the fly as you're trying to do your own thing and sort of adjusting to that, and learning a crew as you play against is just a completely different thing. Like you have to play this game. You have to play a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that plays right into the whole conversation, really, because we're talking about identifying gaps in your own play, and it, I think it's kind of impossible unless you play a ridiculous amount and have incredible like memory retention, to have experience against everything in this game. Like you just can't do it.
yeah,
And you can theory craft until you're blue in the face, but when you actually get to the table and see an encounter and some terrain and see that your opponent has declared McMorning, we'll just make up a master here. Um, a lot of that stuff kind of goes out the window. Like I think that most people, when it comes to the list building stage, lose a lot of that information that they've tried to cram into their head all that time. So I think that kind of the most important thing to improving your ability to be successful in Malifaux in particular is getting your own game plan down pat. You're never going to know everything about your opponent's crew. It's just not going to happen.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Really knowing what your crew does and what the flexibilities and strengths of your crew are, even if you don't understand what the other person's going to bring to the table and what sort of they can do, which you're not gonna, right? There's just so much. Really understanding your game plan and having a plan going in, I think is the most important thing when you're learning Malifaux, or I guess if you're trying to get better. Um, that's sort of where my head's at.
yeah, I mean, there are certainly masters that you could play against that could like catch you between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. But I think that there aren't really as many of those as you might expect. I mean, even just a cursory glance at some cards, or just asking your opponent for a brief breakdown on like, how's your crew work? Are there any big watchouts? Maybe they'll tell you, maybe they won't. You can't necessarily trust them to be honest with you or fully upfront, or maybe they might not even realize until partway through the game some of the stuff that they can do to your crew, and then okay. But I think that for me, one of the ways that I kind of work around that when playing against a lot of new crews is I've spent a lot of time working on kind of holding back my tendency to be very, very hyper aggressive, in games. I'm I've very frequently been the person that is the hammer, that is the alpha strike, that is the you know blow your opponent off the table and ask questions later, kind of person. I I had a real tendency, especially in second edition and in the early part of third edition, to overextend my models, and then a lot of the game really just comes down to swingy cards, bad flips. That's when you can kind of fall into the trap of saying, well, my game plan was good, but I just flipped like crap, or my opponent flipped really hot, so I lost. And I
Yeah, I
find
mean,
that
there
yeah, go ahead, Doug.
there's a so the very specific point that you just made. Uh, I when I got back into competitive tabletop and I kind of dropped Magic, I would get frustrated sometimes and have that conversation with like Sam in a Malifaux game or something. And the point that came up again and again is that if your game is, and I actually talked to Pope DARPA about this as well. Um, if your game is close enough where a single bad flip can decide the strategy in one direction or another, you have done a fundamentally poor job executing that if that was your primary game plan. is kind of the feedback that I had gotten, which is like, don't be that aggressive, because I also love super glass cannon alpha strike bomb lists. It's a big reason that my primary master that I use in Gaining Grounds 3 is Maxine 2. I love like throw it into your face, take models off the board masters, and I've had to rein in my playstyle because I would often tend towards that playstyle really aggressively, and I've had to come back from that position, which I would assume maybe probably you have had to also.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I found that. I mean, it's a habit that's easy to fall back into as well. So, as an example, I played a game against Pete from Rage Quit Wire yesterday, and he played Ulix 2, and I played Misaki 1, who I've been jamming on a lot lately. I've been playing her like crazy, so I feel like I've got a really good handle on her. There was one point in the game, very, very early turn 1, where my hand kind of stunk. I was sitting on a 13 and a 9, and then a bunch of other junk. And I said, well, there's a Swine Curse in front of me. It doesn't have any glowy on it. I'm pretty sure I can just one round it with Misaki. I'm going to unbury her early turn 1 and take this Swine Cursed off the table before it activates. Well, guess what? My hand did not support my plan. The flips did not go my way. He flipped high. I did not have enough cards to counter him with. I ended up wasting an entire Misaki activation turn 1 and put her in a vulnerable position, and I did a grand total of 2 damage to the Swine Cursed. So that wasn't great. And I realized as soon as I said I'm going to activate with Misaki and unbury her, I was making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
So, falling back into those old habits is something that can be kind of easy to do. You get like the bloodlust, you start seeing red, and you're like, oh, I can kill that thing. And then,
I mean, especially with Misaki, she's like a kill button master. That's like her thing,
Yeah. I was like, yeah, she's stat 7. It'll be fine. I have charge through. I'll be able to swing on it. Hit severe, cheat in this 13. And then it was like flipped to 1, had to cheat the 13 to hit. And then he just flipped high enough that my next 2 attacks just missed. I'm like, oh, well, that plan stunk. And then the next thing I knew, she was like burning 3 and at 5 health turn 1. Like, oh, great. This is going well.
Oh, wonderful. What a wonderful time.
Exactly.
At least Bestest Boy can double pulse heal her while she's buried.
Yeah.
As long as she doesn't die. So,
true story. Well, Bestest Boy died shortly thereafter.
Rough.
But that's another story.
That's hard.
So
that boy keeps another card for you.
What I'm getting at is I know that this is a weakness of mine as a player. I do my best not to fall into that trap, and occasionally it still kind of happens. Brandon, were you going to say something?
No. Never.
Never? You're not going to say anything?
All right. Oh, no. Hold on. No, I was wrong. Yeah, that's rough. I like Shang, but I definitely get the I want to murder Shang immediately. He's like my number 1 goal whenever I play Misaki is kill Shang immediately, sell out to do it.
You mean whenever you play against Misaki?
Yeah, that's what I said. Misaki.
No, you said whenever you play Misaki as Misaki.
Yeah, whenever play Misaki means play when I don't play as Misaki. I play against Misaki. That's the only time I play Misaki.
Well,
I think I was grammatically accurate. My point is, man, fuck Shang. He has Arcane Reservoir, right?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe it's not the best idea, and I always feel super vulnerable when I have the a model with Arcane Reservoir.
When I trade my master for Shang,
but I'm always like, man, I gotta kill their Arcane Reservoir immediately.
Is that your greatest weakness as a player?
That might be my greatest weakness.
Blindly attack all Arcane Reservoir targets.
If there's an Arcane Reservoir, I will do anything to kill it, and that's probably not right. I've learned
like Hulk
something
Smash
today.
Mode. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. We've isolated very specific.
Wild.
We've isolated very specific parameters for you to improve your game. Don't Hulk Smash Arcane Reservoirs.
No, do Hulk Smash them. Just don't sell out to do it, I think is the takeaway here.
I guess be more measured in how you kill Arcane Reservoirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. It's the friends you made.
So basically, if I take a model with Arcane Reservoir, I can use it to bait you into a bad position.
Well, now that you said this, you won't be able to because I've learned.
Have you though? Really?
That's the point of the episode.
I don't know, Jesse. We'll have to find out. You want to play a game tomorrow?
Test his metal.
Come up to the game store. Where do you're not like super far away from us, right? Or are you?
Yeah, like an hour and a half.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of far on a Monday, but if you want to come out, we'll do it.
You can test your metal on Vassal.
All that midweek one.
I recently learned Vassal. I've been getting secret lessons from an unnamed sensei.
From an unnamed vassal sensei?
An
How dare
unnamed
you
vassal
study in
sensei.
secret and hone your craft? How dare you do that?
I must hone my craft.
Indeed. So anyway, the whole like hyper-aggression overextension thing that I had fallen into, I kind of had like I had a moment one time after I overextended myself into, ironically enough, a Misaki crew and got absolutely mangled back in kind of early third edition. And I realized that, like, okay, I've been doing the same thing for most of second edition. I've never been better than a mid-table player. I enjoy the game, but like I want to feel like I'm getting somewhere with my play experience. I don't want to just play the same game every time I hit the table with whatever crew I happen to be taking. So I spent a lot of time doing some kind of like self-reflection, doing some like stuff in the dojo, so to speak, doing like single player games against myself, on my kitchen table or my gaming table downstairs, and just basically practicing turn one. I did so many turn one only games and then just re-rack, start from turn one again, just to make sure that I had a better sense of what my unpacks actually needed to look like and what I needed to accomplish on the first turn. So that turned into kind of what I consider a more interesting game, which is pressuring my opponent through my own model positioning, knowing that they can't necessarily get to me and have an impactful activation without sacrificing a model to do so. And using that to kind of control their movements and the way that they play the game and run the table. I found that to be really rewarding. I actually like it a lot more than the kind of YOLO game experience that I used to have. One thing that I really had to work on to kind of get to that place too was resource management. I used to be so bad at resource management, throwing cards at stuff that didn't matter, like recognizing the fact that, okay, my opponent's probably going to kill this model. Unless they flip real low, I probably don't want to dedicate any resources to this and just hold my mid cards, my 8s, my 9s, my 10s, to hit TNs that are really critically important later in the turn, and not selling out and blowing my hand or my stones on maybes. If I don't know that I'm actually going to kill something, maybe not committing all those resources and just seeing what luck does for me. That was a big struggle for me. Learning that a hit is not always worth the high card took a lot longer than it should have for me to learn.
Do you think that you could make that into either a motivational poster or a t-shirt without infringing on any IP property rights?
Probably.
Literally, a hit is never really worth the high card.
Probably.
That might have some
yeah.
other connotations, though.
To Brandon's point, one of the things that's really helped me sort of improve my play is starting a content creation channel. Not everybody can start a content creation channel, or not everybody has the time or motivation to do so. But, I mean, just getting kind of involved more in the community at large. It's great to have sort of like a nuclear group of gaming buddies, either online or at a local store or kind of a region. But getting a little bit more involved in the online conversation while still making sure that you can parse the good information from the bad, the good opinions from the maybe not so well informed opinions, it is, I think, really important. So one of the things that I did was I started getting. I intentionally tried to be very vocal in a lot of the chat groups. That's kind of the way that I journal after games. I'm sure that the folks in the Bayou chat group on Facebook and the Thunders chat group on Facebook are sick of me giving frickin' play-by-plays of every tournament that I go to and every fun game that I have. Turns into a lot of walls of text and too long didn't read sort of diatribes. But that I found has actually been really, really helpful for me in identifying my weaknesses and moving beyond them. Some people actually keep a journal, like they actually write down notes about their games immediately following. I don't think that that's a bad idea either. It might actually help. I've considered doing that myself just because I feel like some key points, it might actually help me commit them to memory a little bit better. But do you guys do any of that stuff, kind of like post-game debriefs or anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely do. So when I'm there's I guess there's you made a couple of good points that if it's okay, I kind of want to like
Yeah,
backtrack to two of them really quickly, and then I'll
for
answer
sure.
that one kind of in order. So when I'm learning a game, for me, there's different phases of learning the game, right? Like there's how do I be competent and understand the core blocking and tackling of a game, and then
Mm.
there's how do I become proficient with a specific team or a deck, right? Because so for me, it's like in the Magic analogy, that's the first time I was ever really competitive at a nationally and world ranked level in something, right? Was when I was doing Magic grinding. And there's studying the game and studying interactions and studying the meta and studying other decks. That's one vertical. And then the other vertical of preparedness is studying your own deck and knowing like the tool that you're bringing to the table or the tool that you're bringing to the tournament. So in your case, lately for you it would be Mizaki, right?
Hmm.
Studying the Last Blossom keyword versus studying Gaining Grounds 3, right? Those are
Yeah.
two different types of things to understand, right? So for me, it's studying the EVS keyword and studying the Cadmus keyword so that I know and I have memorized all of my triggers or all of my target numbers. When I look at an opening hand, I don't need to look at my cards because I know my TNs for all my critical abilities and I have earmarked in my head whether or not I'm going to fight for turn order on that turn or whether or not I'm going to not really care and just try to get like somewhere in the later stages of activation to do a thing, like being able to think about that. And I get enabled by doing that by studying all of my triggers and all of my card stats and everything. And only by knowing those can then I look at a board state and be really relaxed about a board state and think at another level because otherwise there's just too much going on in a game of Malifaux, unless you've done that practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, learning your crew and learning a crew, and that's a whole nother part of the conversation I want to get into, but learning your crew and learning what you actually need out of your hand on a given turn is such a big piece. Like, I look at my hand with Misaki because, like you said, she's been kind of my jam lately. So I pick up my hand and I say, well, I know I'm going to need a Ninja Vanish with the Torakage. I need a 7
Right.
for that. That's kind of a high card. So, all right, cool. I want to look for a low crow so that I can make sure that I get a, what do you call it? An Abandoned Honor off with Misaki. I only need a 4, but I want the crow if I'm trying to go for the trigger. It goes on and on and on and on and on. I could go through every TN in the crew, but suffice it to say, being able to identify what those cards are turn one is really big, and knowing when there might be a really critical TN that you have to throw a face card at because
Yep.
you don't want to burn a stone for it, and you're not going to use the face card for anything turn one. It might be more beneficial to bank it for turn two in some circumstances, but you know you have to get a sense of what your cash looks like, what you think your opponent's going to actually do, and then go from there.
Or
Eh,
knowing that your like 6 of masks is a Frio Toto blink, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
knowing that that's what that card represents, and
Yeah,
not just flushing it for escaping 2 damage from a shockwave or something.
right.
You know?
And then also knowing, like, if you draw a handful of garbage,
Yeah. How is that
maybe not
garbage
trying for
useful?
those flips. Like, what can you do with these cards? Do you
Yeah.
say, well, I'm just gonna, stone for a mask and then hope that I flip the 6 to get a Toto's, shadow marker and leap off, or do I say, ooh, I only have like 3s and 4s in hand. Do I really want to sink a stone and then possibly flip a 2 or a 3 and then I'm completely screwed?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah, I
So,
think I think one of the things that benefited me in that specific arena is learning the game on Titania, and then moving into Dreamer so fast. Like having summoning masters is a really good way of understanding that that sometimes you have to have a specific card or specific value card to do a thing that and then having the discipline to keep that for that purpose specifically, and especially with Titania and the Gorar, because the Gorar is not, it's an enforcer, so you can't stone. If you're gonna slingshot your Malisaurus down the board and then it dies and you want to make another one, you have to have an 11, 12, or 13 of masks. Period. End of story. And if you don't have that, you can't commit to that game plan. So
mhm.
like planning to keep that from round to round really, really sort of locked that in for me really early.
Yeah, and being able to be flexible if you don't draw the resources that you need is a big thing. So, like, as an example, a couple of tournaments ago, the same one that I played Mei Feng against you, Brandon, Doug and I played a game, and Doug brought Maxine 2 into my Asami 1. So I was thinking to myself, like, I'm pretty sure he's going to play Max 2. I feel like I have a good game plan with Asami 1. I feel like she's a pretty decent counter to Max. It should be a good game for me. I'll just summon some Jorogumo. I'll mark a vengeance in me. She can't heal. I'll be able to kill her, and, that'll be it. And then I just didn't draw 13 all game. Like, all game. And I didn't hire a Jorogumo. So I had to very, very quickly be like, okay, I know what else this crew can do. How can I apply my crew's abilities in such a way that I can actually give Doug a tight game? And it did end up being a very tight game. Without that kind of keyword knowledge from reps and study, it makes it really difficult to flex when your game plan doesn't really pan out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, only knowing your plan A and then imploding when your plan A doesn't work is going to be a bad time, because in Malifaux certain things can get shut off by certain incidental abilities, and if you don't have the ability to pivot when you need to from a plan A, you're going to lose a lot of games from that perspective, because you're just going to be like, oh, well, I ran into an obstacle. I guess I just got schmongled. Rip me,
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that I really, really like to do to help improve play, and it's tough because if you're playing against a friend, it usually goes well. If you're at an event, and let's say you just spanked somebody, you won, 5-1, 7-2, like it was a bad game for your opponent.
Yeah.
I am a person who I really don't get tilted very easily, even if I suffer a really significant loss. The debrief immediately after the game is huge for me. Like,
Yeah, me too.
oh my God, it's so huge. And,
Yeah.
Sometimes you run into an opponent at a tournament that it's tough to do that with, because sometimes they can get a little salty, or they just don't really like talking about a game that they didn't perform well in. What's been you guys' experience with doing debriefs after games in any system, but Malifaux in particular?
So I think that the biggest thing that for me is I know how I approach things, and I understand like my perspective in games, especially being somebody who's played so far primarily Neverborn. My experience in things are very different than my opponents, and so like, I mean, I guess the big thing for me is sort of talking to my opponent and figuring out sort of what their mental state was through the game. I mean, there's a lot of things that I sort of plan and do, but the debrief that's the most important for me is sort of understanding what things I did made them sort of edgy and sort of like having to plan around things, because I only have I guess I only have my perspective when I'm just sort of in the game, but at the end, like, knowing what things I did put them really like on the edge of their seat and not really sure how to react. That's sort of been the most valuable feedback for me, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It really does.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be tough to go back through a blow by blow, because then your opponent's like, well, I had a 13. I just chose not to spend it. The whole game would have been different if this model hadn't died. Like, it can get tough to get much value out of debriefs like that. But I think that your tack is a little bit more constructive, probably for both players. So, and this I'll just address to both of you guys rather than just Brandon too. So, like, when you have identified that you have some sort of a skill gap, we'll say, and you're trying to figure out how to bridge those skill gaps, like, not necessarily list building, not necessarily talking tech, but like the actual issues that you have in your gameplay, how do you work on moving past those?
So I mean, for me, I think it's being able to divorce my gameplay from who I am as a player. Like, seeing that to be able to get really good, I need to be able to take feedback. So I take feedback all the time and I try to implement it. Um, I guess when I was younger, I had a response of like kind of just being like, no, I lost because of this, when somebody would tell me something, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or like not taking feedback about competitive matches as a personal attack, just as a constructive criticism, and being able to look at getting better as an objective path and being able to learn from mistakes. And what I think of oftentimes is if I make like a game playing mistake, I've had to train myself to not be super salty about it or bitch and complain about it. I just go, okay, like that was a mistake. I learned from it. Like I'm probably not going to try to make this same mistake again. And I found that by embracing that attitude in a hyper competitive gaming mentality, where I force myself to get repetitions on a gaming system, every time I make a mistake, the mistake becomes a learning moment post mortem.
Mhm.
And so if I force myself to get in like 1 to 2 games a week and I make mistakes, as long as I take that attitude and I learn from them, then, I find I make less and less mistakes. Um, I think the biggest thing is going into it with the mindset of being like taking criticism and really trying to objectively dissect the decisions you make
Mhm.
and being fine with not defending them and trying to just learn from them. Because if you take the opposite approach of like, no, I was right and not, never take feedback, then you really won't get better. You know, that's like my thought process.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's very, very easy to fall into that kind of trap. And I know we talked about this a little bit before, but think to yourself, when that model didn't die, when my model died, when my ability failed, what could I have done differently the next activation? Or what could I have done differently 2 activations prior to get around that situation, to provide myself an alternative win condition, so to speak? That's kind of a big deal because the way that this game plays, unless it's turn 5 or the last turn of the game, very rarely does a win or a loss hinge on a single card flip. They'll certainly come to those situations where, like, I had a game last week where one of my Torakage failed a Ninja Vanish, so that changed it from a draw to a loss. But there's a zillion things I could have done before that to improve my play, and I thought about that a lot afterwards,
Yeah,
and
what led up
probably had
to
a very
putting you in the
yeah,
position where you
exactly.
needed to make that flip to get that draw, you
Right.
know?
So, and I thought about it afterwards, and I said, well, I think the biggest problem is that I spent most of my Thunder Archer's AP killing drudges when I should have just spent my Thunder Archer's AP instead of killing the drudges that I knew were going to be coming back and trying to knock scheme markers off the table, just killing his surveyors, killing the models that were actually causing me problems. Like, if I had reallocated those resources, it would have drastically changed the way that the game actually played out. Instead of just saying, oh, should have been a win if I had moved my Ototo over here to contest that guard point and then not failed my Ninja Vanish so that I could score my Leave Your Mark. Well, that's not really what lost me the game, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that mindset. It's being open to the fact of like, how did I end up in this position to lose the game? Can I rewind backwards? Oh my God, it might have been that time where I cheated in that 13 that I didn't have to like save that minion that didn't matter, and I really needed to
Mm-hmm.
hold that card. I've had that when I was learning the game a ton, when it was like I get to like a late activation and I don't have a card to titch to flurry because I've been
Mm-hmm.
holding on to my 13s, but I forgot to hold on to a crappy card to make a flurry attack or attack again or something, you know?
Yeah, and I think that level of self-reflection is more important in Malifaux than really almost any other game that I've played. A lot of other games tend to be a lot more granular. This is one that has a lot of player agency.
Yeah, I
Um,
was about to say the exact same thing. Malifaux is one of the systems that I've found that has one of the highest degrees of player agency, like that I've played, and it's more akin to chess almost than anything from an alternating activation and player agency standpoint, and even like a number of pieces standpoint.
mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, you guys have played a lot of CCGs. Brandon, obviously, you were highly ranked in L5R. I've never played L5R, so I don't really know how that game plays, but I played a lot of Magic. And I know that, I mean, and you guys can probably attest to this, like, in Magic, there's a certain degree of player skill, especially in some deck types. Um, but it's definitely a lot more granular than I mean, it's kind of a weird comparison to make, like Magic to Malifaux, but I think you get what I'm saying. I mean, like, a lot of the game of Magic is in your deck building and your sideboarding and your ability to pilot the deck that you have. But
Yeah, I call it flooping the pig. If
yeah,
you
there you
floop the
go.
pig, you do the thing, and no truer than in like combo decks or something like that. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a well point taken. That's what I was saying. Like you study your deck and you have it do the thing, and if you do the thing, oftentimes you just win in Magic.
right. Exactly. Exactly. So, what was your experience in L5R like with that, Brandon?
So L5R is sort of a crazy thing, right? So L5R was pretty is pretty complex. The thing that L5R had going for it was that every time you played a creature, you sort of decided how much to invest in that, and all of the creatures in L5R lasted a number of turns equal to how much you overpaid for them. So L5R felt a lot, I guess, a lot of player agency sort of situations, right? Because you every single choice that you made rippled so deep into the future turns that sort of planning for that was just, it was a lot to wrap your head around. It probably one of the most complicated card games that I've ever seen. And the plan was just to sort of really think a couple of steps ahead, and when that money that you were spending on the cards that you were playing, or rather the fate that you were, the in-game resource is called fate. So the fate that you were spending and how much you overpaid really affected everything. Um, and that I don't know that there's a parallel, I guess, into Malifaux with that.
I mean, it sounds to me like there is. Just
Well,
yeah, that sounds like there's a ton of player
yeah,
agency in
but
that.
significantly, significantly in the player agency category for sure. I think that the adaptability and sort of deciding when and what you were playing against, what sorts of things to sort of overbid or underbid on, what was huge. That's for sure. And the other thing that was nice was that with L5R, you had a static sort of income.
Mhm.
You could bank your money from turn to turn, and like deciding when to bank versus when to spend was really important. But you got 7 every turn, and so being able to budget for that sort of feels similar to how, I guess, in an abstract sort of way, you budget for like what cards you keep in your hand, and having that sort of
Sure.
knowledge of what's happening from round to round is really important. Um, but I think that the thing that I sort of focus on when I'm trying to work on a thing is to try to not make too many changes. Um,
Mm.
101. So like going from learning GG3 or from GG2 to GG3, right? The thing that really started getting GG2 to click in my head was going after certain schemes, and when that scheme shows up in the pool, play it. Doesn't matter what I'm doing, go for it, and really just try it over and over again. Taking lists that, when I'm playing a single master in not necessarily in multiple rounds of an event, but a lot, not changing too many things at once, and sort of really getting to, I guess, experience what it is, then the flexibility of the things that you can do, and trying to think outside the box and problem solve with the tools that you have at hand before you go changing everything, which I guess is really the opposite of what I've done recently, because I just recently have decided that I'm going to sort of main Arcanist for a while and see how that goes. So that's a fun new change, but yeah, L5R was a really interesting thing. There was so much decision making, and sort of the monetary aspect of when to bank your money each round and when not to was a lot to get through.
Yeah, I
That was
mean that.
probably
Yeah,
that's what new players struggled the most with.
that sounds like very appealing to me.
Oh,
It's too bad. It's too bad that the game doesn't
great
exist
game.
anymore.
Yeah,
Does it?
no, it doesn't. Fantasy Flight officially canceled it in its current form as the living card game, and it is not ever going to come back. But I still have all the cards. Do you ever want to play it sometime? We did it once, and I guess we're gonna have a Cinco de Mayo de Rings. Oh, I don't know, something like that. We're
Cinco
gonna
de
do.
Rings, though.
Yeah,
Nice.
we're gonna get together on May 5th and play L5R and drink margaritas. That's the plan at the moment. So I'll hit you up
Aw.
when that comes around.
So
That sounds lovely.
before we move on to kind of talking about what we're working on right now, was there anything else that you guys wanted to add on the identifying gaps and bridging them piece?
I think seeking out feedback from people that you
Hmm.
play with, or seeking out, like actively seeking out feedback and then really internalizing the feedback from people that you play with or that you know are good at the game. Um, it's important to get opinions from people that like you think are going to give you reasonable feedback so that you can act on it, right? So
Mhm.
you don't want to like break down a game post mortem with a person who only plays like Malifaux only like once every 3 months or something and try to ask them about the current GG3 changes. Like that's not a valuable conversation, you know? But if you log into like the weird forums, the thing that I've found about Malifaux players, especially online, ones that are hyper passionate about this game, is that if you ask them intelligent questions, they're more than happy to give you detailed answers. And they're very nice. Like the weird forums is a really good place to get feedback. A lot of the discords, we have a discord where if you wanted to get list building feedback or you wanted to ask questions about strategies and stuff like that, boring conversation has a really good discord where you guys do this kind of the same thing, maybe a little different because you're not the exact same thing, but
Mhm.
I would encourage people to do that. It's so good to get feedback about specific questions and learn from them because there's the Malifaux world from a competitive standpoint is so wide that you really want to try to understand at least little bits where and how you can because you're going to have to play so many games to wrap your arms around everything, you know? At
Mhm.
least that's what I found learning Malifaux from the ground up in GG2. So,
Yeah, and one of the things I was going to say is this is not on the same vein necessarily, but some of the advice that a lot of times we give to newer players, like stick with one crew or stick with maybe, two or three crews and really learn them inside and out, is something that I feel like I've really gotten back to as maybe a somewhat more experienced player. Um, I at this point, I own all of Bayou. I own 90% of Thunders, and I own probably 60% of Explorers. It would be very easy for me to play something different in every game.
yeah.
Um, I have made a point while trying to learn Gaining Grounds 3 and advance my play that I am going to focus on playing 2 or 3 masters, period.
Yeah, I did the same
Like,
thing. Yeah.
I've picked my Bayou 3, I've picked my Thunders 3, I've picked my Explorers 3. And if I bring one of those to an event, I'm not bringing, well, I might bring everything, but I'm not going to take, the vast majority of the faction out of the case. And I'm going to get reps and reps and reps with those couple of masters so that I can apply some of the learnings that we've talked about earlier in the episode to those keywords and to the new gaining grounds. So, you know, I feel like it's kind of a trap to show up to a tournament and say, well, I've got all 8 keywords with me. I think I'm going to play Brewmaster in this one, and I haven't played Brewmaster in 6 months. Like,
Yeah, it's going to be bad.
it's
Dude,
going
I
to
know
be bad.
I showed up to the last tournament that we were um at off the wall, right?
Hmm.
That was the last one.
Hmm.
And I did exactly that in round 2. I was like, "Oh, this pool is great for the Cadmus kids." And I hadn't played Cadmus kids in like a month and a half maybe.
Hmm.
So, you know how we were talking about like being proficient with your triggers, knowing your TNs, knowing what suits you need. Brother, I was the exact opposite of that. And I did make the right selections from a hiring standpoint and from a pool standpoint, but my play was so grossly sloppy
Hmm.
that my turns took forever. Um, I didn't get the full kind of mileage out of the crew because that crew is very powerful if you pilot it correctly. Uh, and I won, but I barely won. I won by
Hmm.
1 point, and I deserved to lose that game, but it was for the exact reason that you just brought up, and I got lucky. I won that round by 1 point, and I eventually 3-0'd. And but like I should have lost based on my play. It was sloppy. So
Yeah, I mean, and even narrowing it down to just a couple of keywords, I think that even drilling down a little further than that and saying this, if I'm playing Kin, this is my core 5 model crew, and I use that every single time. And then I just swap out, three models based on situation and flex for like tech or something like that, but not making big, wide, sweeping changes. I think that that's one of the things that just is appealing to me because I tend to play very heavily keyword crews. I'm not one of those that takes a lot of out of keyword picks, a lot of versatiles, much to my detriment in Thunders because they're loaded with great options for both of those. But I mean, my Misaki crew that I've been rocking, you know, I soloed her at your event, I soloed her at Off the Wall. I've been playing a bunch of casual games. 6 of the models in that crew are fixed. I only flex 2 ever.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's kind of common for third edition. You know, like you don't really see more than 1 or 2 flex slots all that often because the taxes. You know, the taxes will get
Sure.
you, Jesse.
The
The taxes
taxes
will
will
get
get
you.
you.
Yeah,
Indeed.
that's super the position that I'm currently in. So I've chosen that for the time being. I think I'm just gonna rock Hoffman and Witness. And so like I have my Hoffman crew that I pretty much have decided. I have about 5 models I guess that I'm gonna play in every game, and then they're like the ones that are crucial for the unpack. And then there's like 1 or 2 flex slots. One's like a keyword one, and then my out of keyword. What do you call it? Arcane Reservoir jockey. Um, like you do. But yeah, no, I think that sort of harkens back to my, like, you know, if you're going to make changes, make small ones, you know, really like sort of the iterative process of taking a list and something that you're very comfortable with and introducing 1 or 2 new elements at a time instead of trying to completely reinvent the wheel every single time you play. It just leads to more consistent gameplay, and it really lets you get into the point where you can sort of toolbox and sort of creatively problem solve within a sort of limited ecosystem without going all over the place. Because if you present yourself with 30 new options every time you play, every tournament round, you know, you're gonna hit some cool things for sure, but you're also gonna make a whole bunch of misses, a whole bunch of crazy mistakes. And it's really Malifaux, more than any other game that I have ever played, is a game that is about consistency and sort of knowing what you can do and what you can get away with, and planning and having the resources where they need to be, for things to. And sometimes, hey, sometimes you just flip hot and it works out. But you know, with it being a card system that is, you know, you have exactly 54 cards in every game, having a control hand for added consistency. You know, it's not as random as like 40k. It's not as random as, you know, what you draw and what, you know, what copies of you know, what counter spells or whatever for. You know, it's just not. It's so unrandom and so skill based and luck and not luck driven. You know, it's wild.
Yeah. And like it's very, very hard to improve your skills if you're giving yourself a different set of tools every time you go to the table. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah, you
yeah.
really need to learn. I think like a really good take on it is really trying to learn and understand an initial keyword when you pick up the game, and then once you've really spent time with that keyword and mastered it, then you pick another keyword that's like a foil of that keyword. So
Hmm.
like would be good in other scenarios, you know? And then try to have those within the faction, and then slowly maybe take on like a third keyword, because you can't just sit down and be like, I bought 4 keywords, I'm starting out Malifaux, I'm going to try a game with every keyword for a little while, because you're not going to master the core mechanics of what makes that keyword powerful. And as a result of that, you're going to get in a lot of very low level games where you're just trying to read cards and abilities, and you're not going to retain anything, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So as far as where you guys stand right now, what weaknesses are you working on improving
Oh, I have a major
right now
weakness.
as we
Like,
speak?
I have a glaring, awful weakness in my play, and it has cost me dearly in multiple tournaments.
Do
And it's
tell.
that so this sprouts from me being a Magic player, basically. And this is in Magic, I used to play too quickly, and I would lose percentage points because I would take actions too quickly without looking at the board state. And I would be like, tap this guy in response, do this thing, and I would not be paying attention to like a board state or the fact that my opponent had blue untapped mana and I was playing a critical spell into like 2 blue untapped and a colorless when like clearly negate was in the format. Like, good job, Doug. Way to be a top 8 player at like a top 8 cut. Like real high level gameplay. And it was just making stupid mistakes because I played too quickly. And so I learned, and the feedback from my team when they were watching me was like, "Hey man, you play way too fast. Like, chill out. You're gonna finish your games." Because I would always play aggro or combo
Sure.
in Magic. I've really just like reducing my life points or my opponent's life points to 0. That was my favorite way to win the game. Um, and they were like, chill out, man. You're playing way too fast and you're making play mistakes because of it. You're not going to time. You're not even in the stratosphere of going to time. Take your time, consider your options, and then take the best option. And then I do that in Malifaux, and it takes me way, way too long.
Yeah, you get
Like
to like turn 3. It's like,
I
oh
get to
shit.
like turn 3 on my games, and I never get to finish a game. And I played against Rich on that lesson. Probably germinated the most 2.5, 3 months ago when I was playing against Rich from the Danger Planet team, and it was like the semifinals right before the last round. We were both XO, so and I was on Kurai 2 and he was on Mawtucket 1, so I was set up for success because I had gotten Kurai 2 into Mawtucket 1 on like a claim jump like board. So it was like
Hmm.
I was going to be able to just move through the pit traps, right? And I triple guessed every decision, um, and we only ended up getting to turn 3. And Rich suicided his whole squad to get ahead of me a point because he knew the game was going to end. And then the game ended, and I lost by a point. And Rich looked at me and was like, "Dude, if you had just played at a normal pace and you hadn't triple guessed everything, you would have easily won this game." And I looked at him and I was like, "Yeah, I know that." Um, and so that's why when I look at how I can improve as a Malifaux player, it's how can I make my pace of play as quick as possible without making a detriment to my decisions. And that's how I also get back to studying my TNs, studying my suits. Like when I go to bed at night, I have my crews that I'm going to play at the next tournament, and I study the TNs and I cover them with my thumb, and I'm like, okay, is this what this is? Yeah, it is. Okay. And then that helps me play faster because everything that I need to do right now as a competitive player is just play faster, basically. That's like my
Cool.
biggest leak in Malifaux. It really fucks me up because I need to be able to finish my games. Like that Cadmus 2 game that I should not have won. I won by a single point and we only got to like turn 3.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
should not have won that game. I played like shit. So that's me for sure. 100%. That's my leak.
What about you, Brandon?
Well, I think that the thing that's the most important for me probably right now is, I got to learn my new keywords, right? So I've sort of decided what I want to play, and that's I think one of the hardest things because there's so many options in Malifaux, right? So I'm at that point now, and I sort of had done a little bit of the groundwork on understanding what GG3 had going on, but that was under so many different operational parameters that I am basically relearning it now from the ground up with Witness and Hoffman. So I'm starting with Augmented. I'm playing a bunch of games with those. I have some games scheduled this week. We're gonna focus on the ArmorCon rounds, which is super helpful. So it's not I don't have to do everything, but I sort of have a game plan going into each thing. And what I've been doing mostly for tournament prep is I've been running specific rounds that we have going on with specific crews and sort of planning out what I want to play so that I have like some plans going in and sort of can take the schemes and strat pools one at a time. And I put together basically a little spreadsheet of the physical images of the cards for each pool strategy and schemes. And each round I have a page and I take notes on that page. That's what I did for the thing we just went to. What was that? Nova. That's what I did for Nova, and I love having like a physical printout of the whole pool on a single page. And I probably wouldn't have ever found that if the GG3 cards were available because I would have just had the cards. But having it all on one printed out page is just so incredibly useful. So I'm doing that, and we'll see. But lots of learning new keywords and new synergies, and Arcanists just play so radically different than Neverborn. There's just so much that's not even grossly like even similar at all. I'm learning what aggro is for the first time in Malifaux. That's sort of wild. Did you know you can kill your opponent's models? Wild stuff. Yeah, like you just like do all the damage instead of like 30 individual points of damage. Sort of crazy. Did you know armor and guns exist? I didn't. That's wild. Dude, armor is a hell of a drug.
I have to congratulate you, Brandon, because you've successfully chosen the 2 keywords that I am least excited to play against in Arcanists.
Yeah, I think that's what the focus group came up with, right?
Probably because they're really good.
we needed to plan how I could Krongle you, Jesse. That was the goal. I got to take the belt back the next time I'm not actually counting my score because I'm ringing and don't get to play you at my event. But it's
Hoffman
fine.
Hoffman and Jan Low are like my two friggin' white whales. They're the ones that I just can never seem to beat.
I mean,
It's
they're
brutal.
both really good.
Yeah, if it helps, I was on the fence on Rezzers for a while, and the plan was going to be basically like only Bank Morning and Jan Low, but
yeah. At least I don't have to worry about Kirai 2 that much these days. That's all I'll say.
I'm gonna play Kirai too.
No,
She's
you won't.
great.
No.
What?
Doug.
What?
No.
I converted
do it.
her. Come on, man. It's great. Everybody loves Kirai too. It's a wholesome play experience for everyone involved. It's not maddening at all. You know?
Yeah. So for me, probably my next hurdle in improving my play overall is list building, surprisingly enough. I feel like I've got a good handle on running the board and managing my resources, but I make a lot of mistakes in list building. I have a tendency to... I do what I talked about before. I talk about all the theory craft. I talk about the bad matchups. I talk about the tech picks. And then I get to the table and I see the encounter and I see the board and I'm like, oh man, Zip will be great into this. This is going to go awesome. Like, how can I lose? And then I like forget that I'm playing into 10 Thunders and they can just put upgrades on their dudes to kill my master. Oops. So making silly mistakes like that, learning how to appropriately counterpick and make sure that I'm taking effective tech pieces on the regular is a big thing for me, especially because, like I said, I tend to play relatively fixed lists. And as an example, I was playing into Sam's Max 2 at the last tournament that we went to. And I kind of took the list I was going to take, and I didn't really take any tech pieces because I'm like, I don't really feel like there's that much I can take that he's not going to be able to deal with. Like, I could take a Charm Order, he can just kill it. It's not that hard, like whatever. And then I started thinking about some of the possible tech pieces that I could have brought into the game after the fact. And I just realized that I really could have played the list building game a lot better. So that's kind of where I'm focused right now. Remembering the lessons that come from the conversations that I seem to get so much from, and not making silly mistakes.
Specifically the boring ones.
Yes. Cool. That's pretty much all I had. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to add before we wrap this up?
Slap chop painting is a hell of a drug.
I don't know what that is.
So it's this painting technique where basically you just dry brush everything, start from a black undercoat, dry brush it up all the way to white through like the grayscale, and then use the contraster speed paints over it. I painted almost 2 full crews. I painted all of Marcus just because it was my only Neverborn crew that was unpainted, and almost all of the new Hoffman Nightmare box in 5 days. It's wild.
That's impressive.
It's literally nuts. I can't. I'm having so much fun with it, and I've done it's given me the time to mess around and do a bunch of weird blendy stuff. Like I have some rainbow Marcus people, and then I did like the crazy blendy Arcanist Bowl. So like, if you haven't tried slap chop painting and you've been at any point trepidatious about your models, like do some Googling, check it out. It's the most wildest thing that I have ever wilded or thinged.
That's actually kind of cool because
huge fan.
I've never been a big painter, like at all.
Yeah,
at all.
I'll send you some pics later of the nonsense that I have been up to in the past week, and I am shocked at how minimally effort it is. And I've been painting for a long time, right? I can paint reasonably well if I really put my mind to it. But the exchange rate on time spent to how good things look under this painting method is blowing my mind. It's wild. Cannot recommend it enough. Not that that's really about getting better at the game, but
well, no, it's just something.
The hobby's part of the game, I think.
Yeah. That's actually kind of cool because I have my nephew lives like in Michigan, like half the country away, and he's 13. So we've been talking about doing like some kind of like virtual paint leagues because we got him like a Pathfinder like learn to paint set or D&D learn to paint set for his birthday. But I've never been much of a painter, and that might be a great way for me to kind of get into the hobby for kind of the first time in my life. Yeah.
You ever want to come down on a weekend? We could totally do it like a paint thing. That'd be great. I'd be super down.
That would be dope. I would get a lot out of that. Cool. Anything else you wanted to add, Doug?
I just think the attitude of being open to taking feedback about a game if you want to get good at a game is like so important. Having like that accepting mindset, you know? And
Yeah.
it's only a thing that you really need to subject yourself to and go after if you're trying to get good at a tournament competition level, you know? Like, to a greater point, I don't think that necessarily holds if you're like just playing casual with your buddies, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think having an open mindset about taking feedback on gameplay and then trying to implement that, it has been the most helpful thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that I know that have gotten into Malifaux from other games that maybe their mindset has just not been well suited to playing Malifaux. Like they've been netlisters. They've been, I'm going to research the most powerful, Dark Eldar 40k army, and I'm going to spend $800, $900, whatever it is, on this army, assemble it, roll up to a tournament, and just dice my opponents into oblivion. They roll into Malifaux with this really well thought out crew, and they lose like their first 10 games, and they just can't get past that hurdle.
Yeah.
And they quit, and it's really too bad because
I lost to Sam probably 20 times in a row
yeah.
before I was ever even able to tie him. And I've never even beaten Sam because the one time I was supposed to beat the gosh darn gremlin prince, he had to natty flip a 12 plus blind to beat me. And he did on the last flip of the game. It was to Tidecaller one of my guys off of a ley line.
Hmm.
And he did it to beat me. So I've just gotten my face punched in so many times by good players. Like, you've beaten the shit out of me like a bunch of times. I've had, all sorts of good players just wreck me, and I really actually enjoy it because like I learn lessons. I get to watch players pilot lists that are really good, and then emulate and take stuff from them. So
Cool.
Yeah, I don't think that I can say enough for getting paired up against David Longton in the first round of every massive Malifaux tournament. I've learned so much. That's happened at Connecticut Captain Con, and then also it happened at Nova this round, and it was like halfway through that round where I was like, all right, I'm playing Arcanist from now on. The Witness Crew is so cool. It does so many things, and I learned from some of the best, I guess the best so far, best placing result with Witness. So, playing against people who are better than you and getting your face pushed in, that's really, I think there's no better way to learn.
Indeed. Cool. And with that, I think we can probably bring it home here, folks. So unless anybody else has anything else to add, I guess we can. Oh, Doug, were you going to say something?
No, we're good.
Oh,
never
mind.
I was just going to say, at time of recording, we have 978 subscribers on the Danger Planet. We are 22 people away from 1,000. We probably will have hit 1,000 maybe by the time this goes out. But, if we're not, stop by and check out, like and subscribe. We're almost there. We're living the dream.
Challenge accepted. I'll see if I can get this edited and posted tomorrow morning
and
still manage to clean the kitchen.
No,
so that I
you
can
will not.
You,
you will not have enough free time to do that, Jesse.
No, I won't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible.
How have you been liking the Thunder Archer plus flip a friendly obey list? Has that been fucking people up? Spamming plus flips on Thunder Archers?
Thunder Archers
are really good. I know.
It's so funny. So I think people. This is kind of funny. In the 10 Thunders group chat, people are all like, Thunder Archers are good. And then the community at large is like, these models look like they kind of suck.
No, they don't.
And I played against Sam. I've played against Sam a couple of times with my Masaki list. And the last time that we played, he actually said, I really did not respect how good those Thunder Archers are.
Yeah, because they have Chi and Blast. And also Sam schmongled himself. He played himself. He was like, oh, I can just take... like a 5 damage hit, and then We Are Legion 4 of it away. And I'm like, no, dude, that's not how We Are Legion works. Like, Meredith Stanley is dead. Like, that girl is dead now because of where you've placed her. And he was like, oh, yeah, I just lost the game, didn't I? And I looked at him and he looked at me. Well, he looked at me, I looked at him, and he said, I think I just lost the game. And I was like, yeah, I think you did too. And then I looked over at the rest of your board and then just was like, all right, yeah, Jesse's just going to clean up Meredith and then his crew's going to crumble. And that's basically what happened. So,
Indeed.
Yeah.
And on that note, we're going to bid you good folks adieu.
That was the outro? Oh.
No. I got to do the outro. I'm still doing the outro.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
so, my bad.
No, it's okay.
I'll mute myself.
I won't.
I wonder how high Doug is right now.
Not at all. Obviously,
Not at
I'm
all.
totally sober.
That is a lie.
I've had no caffeine.
That is also a lie.
No, what? You don't have any proof.
As I watch you on camera drink a caffeinated beverage.
Our ultimate goal was to get sponsored by the 7-Eleven brand caffeine drink. What was it called, Brandon?
No. It's C4. It's not 7-Eleven. It's Nutribolt that makes it. That was the goal, but like, I don't know. I've moved on. Maybe G Fuel. I think G Fuel will probably sponsor us already. All I have to do is email them.
G Fuel's a big name. I don't know if
well,
we could...
my worry that if we get a G Fuel sponsorship is that I will immediately die.
You think your heart will just constantly be beating at like 300 BPM and then just explode like an overblown DJ record, like boom?
Yeah, it'll either explode or I will just pass into the fourth dimension because of how fast I'm thinking and going, and then I won't be able to play Malifaux because I won't be able to interact with my models.
You'll open your G Fuel third eye.
Yeah, my G Fuel third eye will open and I will ascend, but then I won't be able to play Malifaux anymore. So we're not.
You know what? Honestly, if that's what happens, that's fine. I wish the best for you once you ascend.
Me too. I'll have to play 4D Malifaux.
Yeah. You're playing on another realm. All of us other mortals are out here moving to like 3D models around. You're in the astral plane playing like demigods in Malifaux.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
That being said, thank you all for joining us. Keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks.